So this is Capcom Localization team, and I guess they just made this post today. By the way, I'm going to completely disagree with all of this. At the end, I just want to let you guys know, like, I actually saw this earlier today on Twitter, so I've read it, but I completely disagree with all of this. Now, I'll explain why at the end. It says, embark on a global adventure through the lens of game localization beyond mere translation. We're diving into the art of cultural adaptation, preserving context, and inclusive storytelling. Join us as we unravel the intricacies that can make games resonate worldwide. Localization isn't just about translating words, it's about adapting the game for a global audience. Think cultural nuances, idioms, and regional flair. A good localization makes the players feel right at home, wherever in the world they are. The importance of context. Lost in translation, not preserving the vibe is the key. Jokes, references, and even gameplay elements might need a little bit of cultural remix. It's important to find that sweet spot to make sure that players get the intended experience without feeling like something got lost in the process. Bridging the linguistic gap. Each language has its own unique structure and cultural context. Our teams work to ensure the narrative and dialogue maintain coherence and emotional impact. It's not just about words, it's about capturing the essence of the story in a way that resonates with the target audience. Cultural sensitivity and characters. I'm sure this is probably the one that people are upset about. Character design and development must be culturally sensitive. What may be acceptable in one cultural might be offensive in another. Localizers play a crucial role in ensuring that characters are relatable and respectful, avoiding stereotypes and other references that could be perceived as negative in specific cultures. Inclusive language. Localization provides the extent of promoting inclusivity through language and representation. This involves adapting not only the linguistic aspects, but also addressing gender-specific language. I love how this is indicated as something that needs to be solved. I don't think this needs to be solved. Cultural norms and diverse perspectives. The aim is to create an immersive experience where players from different backgrounds can identify with the characters and narrative. This can be very challenging for languages due to grammar. Adapting humor and wit, yeah, sure. Cultural puns, jokes, cultural references, maintained the intended comedic effort. This requires deep understanding of the target audience's sense of humor while staying true to the original wit. Okay, so that's basically it. Consistency in terminology, translating words. So yeah, I completely disagree with all of this. I think this is wrong because I don't think that a lot of these people have actually a very good read on what people actually like hearing or seeing. And also, I think that if you want to add in like cultural sensitivity or, you know, adding in like kind of pop phrases and stuff, I wonder how many animes from like the late 2000s, early 2010s replaced words with epic. Like you're just replacing one type of cringe with another, because that's what I see a lot of it in as well. Like, for example, I've been watching Shangri-La Frontier, and this is a new anime, and I've almost finished it. I'm like maybe 2/3 done with it. And there are a lot of instances, because I watched the dubbed version, and there are a lot of instances where the language, it's like this was clearly translated by somebody who understands gamers, but the problem is that this doesn't age well. Like, there's a point in the show where he says poggers. Nobody is going to know what the fuck poggers means in 10 years, and it's going to sound extremely fucking cringe. It's like saying elite hacksaws right now. So why are we replacing one degree of cringe with another degree of cringe? I would prefer an almost one-to-one translation, even ignoring cultural norms. I know this sounds crazy, but let me explain why I prefer that. I prefer that because the language and the diction of something like Elden Ring, or what's the most famous one? All your base art belong to us. And we still know it because it's fucking ridiculous. That kind of stuff is what makes things... It adds in a degree of escapism. And I think the best example that I can give to this is Final Fantasy XIV. And like a lot of the Final Fantasy games in general, like use a lot of the same language and like, you know, pray return and stuff like that. This is not what people use in the English language, but because it has like a foreign and alien nature to it, but it's technically correct, I think that it actually adds to the escapism, because it puts you in another frame of mind, and it makes words that don't make sense together, or you make them make sense together. So that's what, and like, I think a really good example of this is actually Miyazaki, the guy that made Dark Souls, Elden Ring, Bloodborne. He said that the way he tries to write stories and the way he writes the narrative in his games is that, you know, he grew up in Japan and he would read English and it would be like this weird, you know, it's like he's a kid reading another language. So it would appear very weird and like arcane and crazy. And so he tries to communicate that same vibe through the language and the characters that he has in games. And I think that Dark Souls bosses, Bloodborne bosses, and Elden Ring bosses are some of the most memorable and quotable bosses in almost all of video games. So, Neil, yeah, exactly. Think about how many of them there are. And that's why I think that, you know, just doing a direct translation as much as you can. Now, I think that they probably localize some of that too, to be fair, right? But I like the weirdness of it. And I think that to me, that adds to the escapism. And I know this might sound like kind of a weird argument to make, but yeah, I just want to see the exact, I want to see it one for one as much as I can. I think this is a space for localization to help make media more accessible with a new audience and a different culture separate from the original. Yeah, I do think that's the case. And I think that that's clearly the goal. But I think sometimes in pursuing a new audience, you remove the, I don't know, like, you remove the mystique of it. And I'm like, I haven't really thought about this a lot, so I don't really have a lot of examples to go off of. Yeah, the mystique, the authenticity. Yeah, exactly. I don't know. I like whenever there's like weird translations like that. You remove the original intent. Sometimes you can, yeah. Direct translation is a way for 99% of media, except for songs and music, in order for a song to work. The words need to be altered to stress the right syllables. Oh yeah, no doubt. Problem with localization is that it's basically a game studio trying not to offend other overseas markets, except domestic markets will pillory them for it, and everyone ends up getting offended. Yeah, I don't know. Like, I think this is something that, like, if I wrote it out in, like, you know, a twit longer, it would make a lot more sense than if I'm just sitting here talking about it, because it's kind of a complex idea to kind of get across. But, like, there's a certain level of, like, mysticism and mystique and authenticity of reading something that's, like, kind of weirdly translated, because it gives a level of escapism that you don't naturally have with local English works. And I think that makes sometimes, like, watching anime or playing a game from Japan, it makes it more interesting and just cooler. But that's my opinion. And I just, and also I don't trust the people that work at the localization teams to understand it better than the original Japanese authors. I don't think that they usually get it in the same way. And I think, like, again, Shangri-La Frontier is a really good example of that. I think in 5 years, that anime will be so dated because of how many cultural references and, like, current, you know, how do you do fellow gamers language that's put in there. Yeah, they have an agenda. I feel like, here's the truth. Oh, we're localizing this to make the character gay. Like, this is like happening 5% of the time. This is very uncommon. I don't think it's happening all the time. I don't think it's really the norm. I think that those are the cases that are, like, really, they make everybody mad. So then everyone's talking about them. But it's one of those things where it's like, you know, like girls on Twitch, where it's like, oh yeah, this girl's like naked on Twitch. Oh my God, what the fuck, right? And everybody's talking about it. But the truth is that, like, most people on Twitch aren't really thinking about this at all. So I think that the truth is most 95% of localization is done in good faith. It's just that for me, I just want to have a one-for-one. That's all. How about localizing some character to make them black in a full Asian white anime game like Lost Ark? I don't think that you should change, like, characters. Like, I don't think you should change characters' gender, their race, their sexuality. I think at that point you are, like, you're changing the fundamental nature of the game. I don't think that you should, like, you know, you do, like, race changes, sexuality changes, gender changes, stuff like that. You're hijacking. Yeah, just make a new character. At that point, I think that's probably the best idea, is make a new character. Let the free market police that? Yeah. And if people don't like games like that, I think that, you know, again, the companies will figure that out and try to do it. You're ruining the vision of the artist? Yeah, exactly. I think that the vision of the artist should be preserved in the most authentic way possible. Because the truth is that whenever people are buying a product, especially like, for example, like a Kojima game, like this is just an example, they're really buying it because they believe, a lot of them, in Kojima's vision for a game. They're not believing in like what Sony is doing or anything like that. They want to get that raw experience. So I think that the more people you put in the way of that raw experience between the artist and the consumer, the worse the experience will become. Just in general. It's like playing a game of telephone, you know?